Where is the leadership coming from this year for the TCU Horned Frogs? Because this has to be a tougher team, at least a more tough-minded team. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're free and available wherever it is you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube today, if you're listening in the traditional podcast audio form, that's totally fine. Subscribe on those platforms as well. But if you're watching on YouTube, hey, could I sew something for you? If you notice this equipment behind me, I'm down in Southeast Texas, Brazoria County. That's where my wife is from. We're visiting her family. Happy Easter weekend to all of you. He has risen just as he said he would, praise the Lord. So I hope you have an enjoyable time with family, wherever you are, or with friends, however you're spending it. Thanks for making the time to listen to the show or watch the show on Good Friday or whenever you're consuming it on the Easter weekend. Want to talk some TCU football here in segment one. Some more news on the basketball front. Jacoby Coles has also hit the portal. Micah Peavy did earlier this week. Now Jacoby Coles going to entertain other suitors as well. And then TCU baseball, they did get a win today against Houston to get to 3-7 in conference play, trying to climb out of that early hole that they put themselves in by losing the first three series of the Big 12 season. But we'll start with TCU football. And I have a pretty simple question today, and it sort of ties together into the main topic at hand. But I want to know, who's the best player on this TCU football team? I was thinking about this today, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Now, football is not like basketball. Basketball is driven by stars, especially in the NBA. You want to get that one franchise-changing player. Luka Doncic has been amazing for the Mavericks. They've tried to build around him. Hasn't fully worked. They did make the Western Conference Finals a few years ago before running into the buzzsaw that was the Golden State Warriors at the time. Giannis Antetokounmpo for the Bucks. Obviously, LeBron in Cleveland and then going to Miami. The list goes on. But in the NBA, it's very clear. You get a star, you build that team around them. Similarly, in college basketball, the best teams usually have great scorers, great guard play, dudes that can go get buckets when you need it, and those players lead the charge. In football, it's the ultimate team sport, so it's a little bit different. But I'm not sure, you don't necessarily need a true alpha. The reason I'm asking about it, though, is I'm wondering where the leadership is coming from this TCU football team. Because 2 years ago, we talked a lot about their mental toughness, their ability to win close games, and they won every close game. I mean, they found a way. They held on against Michigan. They came back and stole that game in Waco against Baylor on the bazooka kick by Griffin Kell to walk it off and win it. They came back and won against Oklahoma State when they looked dead in the water, forced 3 overtimes, and eventually got it done. Maybe it was 2. Can't remember. You get the point. And the list goes on. Held on against West Virginia. That was a team that when the chips were down, they had to make plays. They made them. And the dude that set the tone was Max Duggan, who didn't start the year as a starter, but he took the job and ran with it. And cliches are cliches. That was a great quote by me. I don't like to talk in cliches all the time. I want to be innovative. I want to do this well. I don't want to just go into tired narratives and indulge that all the time. But those intangibles mean something. The dudes on that team followed him. They fell in line and did what he said. They followed his example. They liked that he was a fiery player. You know, when he would break off a big run or run through a tackle, he would get up and go crazy, and the team would get there with him, and they just rallied behind him. And there were a lot of great players on that team. But Sonny Dykes talked about last offseason, he said that group, they did everything right from a leadership standpoint. They kept their eye on what was in front of them, even as, the accolades started to pile up, even as the rankings started to get higher. And the talk of, oh man, could this team win a conference title? Could they go to the college football playoff? Could they play for a national championship? They found a way to stay laser focused on what was in front of them so they didn't lose focus and trip up and have all those things fall away. And last season was the complete opposite of that. The complete antithesis of that team 2 years ago. They did not make those winning plays. They made so many small mental mistakes that set them back, especially on offense. All the pre-snap penalties, all the holding penalties, post-snap, the turnovers, just time after time, that team couldn't get out of their own way. And so it led to some losses in close games. And frankly, it led to some non-competitive performances against Iowa State on the road and then Oklahoma on the road to end the season. And so I wonder where the leadership is coming from this year and who the players on this team are, the best players, the upperclassmen that are going to rally everyone else and get them to fall in line and do what they're supposed to do. And I don't have a great answer to the question. I think if I had to choose, and feel free to disagree with me here, I would probably say Dominic Williams. Now, I definitely would have said that after his freshman year. Last year, he struggled to make splash plays. But Dominic is physical. He's great at the point of attack. He's constantly he's seen double teams. He's been able to create pressure from the interior, make things happen. I think he needs to have a better year this season to solidify himself as a big-time draft prospect. But I feel like that potential is there. Offensively, Savion Williams coming back, had a really good season. I think Eric McAllister could fall in that role, right? Had a great season at Boise State. We'll see what he does here. Now, I'll say this. I don't know. I don't think Josh Hoover is the best player on this team. But I feel like he has a lot of those intangible qualities that you want. The team responded better to him when he took over. Now, what all the reasons are for that, I don't know. I'm not sure what was happening behind the scenes, but I know the body language was better. I know even when he made mistakes, I mean, I said this before, but it just sticks in my mind. When he threw a pick against Texas Tech that ended that last gas drive where they had a chance to go down there and tie it, and Josh throws a pick and they lose the game in Lubbock, Andrew Coker's there with his arm on his shoulder like, hey, we got it. We got you. We're with you. When he made a really bad decision against Texas, Sonny Dykes immediately, I mean, I'm sure he gave him the business in that situation, but you could tell he was like, hey, we have to be better. And he knew that. I just thought the way he carried himself was super impressive. I think the coaching staff is hoping that some of these transfers that are coming in can be productive, not only just for the team to be good, but also they can be productive to get the respect from their teammates so that they can walk in here and be like, hey, we have to take care of business. A few years ago, Josh Newton comes in. I didn't really know much about Josh at all, coming from Louisiana Monroe. But he quickly got integrated in the culture there at TCU. He got the respect of his teammates. And all of a sudden you hear him giving great speeches, whether it was before the season or before the Texas game. He's like, hey, I don't want to lose. We all got to work hard. We got to band together. We got to be together. So I'm wondering where the leadership comes from. But I want to know here in the YouTube comments, or you can tweet at me, @SimCockSteven, who's the best player? And I really want to know, like, right now. Like, if you want to throw a hot take out there, that's fine. Maybe it ends up being Haas Haney. Maybe it ends up being Jakyle Baker. But I think these guys are going to be really good in a couple of years. I'm talking about this year. Who are the best players on this team? Where's the leadership at? And that's like, when I think about this upcoming season and how do we measure success, at the end of the day, it's going to be wins and losses, right? But if there's one thing that I definitely want to see, it's what's the mentality of this team? How physical are they? How mentally tough are they? Because I was concerned about that when Sonny came over from SMU, because that's never really in my mind been who he is. And maybe that's a bad read based on just his time at Cal, but he's always been kind of an offensive-minded guy. You know, they used to call his offense like basketball on grass. And he's acknowledged that he's evolved through the years and come around with the idea of, okay, you have to run the football. You have to have some balance in your offense to make this work. But was year one just an aberration because you had a lot of guys that carried over from the previous regime that were just hungry to win because they had been in disappointing situations their whole careers, and any new voice that got after them and were promising new things, they were like, yeah, let's go. Let's lock in and do this. We want to do this at a high level. Or can we find some consistency with some of those attributes? That's one of my big questions for this upcoming season. From a, just an off the field culture standpoint, what does the Sonny Dykes program look like? Can you get back to that physicality and that toughness that you saw in year one that led to so much success? That has to be a huge key this upcoming season. Another TCU Horned Frog has hit the transfer portal from the basketball team. Jacoby Coles going to explore his options as well. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. If you're ready to go on an adventure, go to nissanusa.com today and start shopping. They are bringing us the March Madness highlight every day through the month of March and through the NCAA tournament. The NC State Wolfpack are obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. They came out of nowhere. They absolutely surprised everybody with powerful performances in the first couple games of the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland has set them up to play Marquette in the Sweet 16. Win life, go Rogue. That's exactly what the Wolfpack have done. Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada and find your next big adventure. Go to shopnissanusa.com. Again, that's shopnissanusa.com. Speaking of the NCAA tournament, the month of March, all the different things that are going on, it's a perfect time to download the app Bettor Together. What is Bettor Together? It's the first daily fantasy sports app that involves the social media aspect of our world by allowing you to team up with your friends and make bets together. It's simple prop bets, more or less based on players. You can log in there today, download it from the App Store, and start betting on these players and these win totals or point totals, whatever you're interested in. Bettor Together. You can play with your friends. If you have a busted bracket, this is what you need to download today so you can get involved in the action. Again, that's Bettor, Bettor Together. Start making bets with your friends. Do that today. Bettor Together, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. Jacoby Coles is in the portal. Jacoby averaged 10 points a game this year for TCU. Had about 4 rebounds, 2 assists, shot 49% from the field. Now, going into this season, we will always have that Jacoby Coles moment. He hit that almost buzzer beater, game-winning shot against Arizona State in the first round of the NCAA tournament a few years back, and he really came on at the end of that year. He hit some big free throws against Texas Tech late in the season that clinched that game and got it done. And going into this year, he was kind of the guy that was the odds-on favorite to be the main scorer, at least one of the main scorers, along with Jameer Nelson Jr., Avery Anderson, Emmanuel Miller. And they tried to really run the offense through him early in the season. Had some issues with that. Wasn't really flowing like they wanted it to. And then he was injured for a while, was in and out of the lineup. Eventually, later this season, Jacoby said that he was dealing with plantar fasciitis. He played better at the end of the year, had a really good game against Utah State. Was honestly the only player that played well on offense that night. Shot the ball pretty well, made some things happen. Jacoby's a talented guy. It's unfortunate that he's moving on. He can shoot the three, he can stretch the floor. But I said this when Micah Peavy decided to move on. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I'm starting to wonder if this is similar to the offseason of 2021, where TCU had been through a few years where they missed the postseason. They had a guy in Mike Miles they were trying to build around. And so they just kind of scrapped everything and they went heavy in the portal. And they said, we're turning over this whole roster. Had a lot of guys leave, had a lot of guys come in, and they created the core of players that end up going to 3 straight NCAA tournaments. And now it feels like they're sort of not at a similar point as far as they've made the postseason as opposed to not, but they've kind of hit a rut here. And so they're trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to take the next step? And so they're mixing and matching, and I think some guys are leaving, and you're going to bring some players in, obviously, to replace that production. But you need to find some scorers, especially when it comes to replacing Jacoby Coles this upcoming season. I also wanted to share this. I had a person who works closely with NIL at another Big 12 school, not TCU, but this is a guy that his job is raising money for an NIL collective at another Big 12 school. And this fall, I was talking to him just about like the changing landscape to college sports, how they're handling this, how they're doing meetings. I had a lot of different questions for him. One thing he shared with me, though, that was intriguing. He said, role players on basketball teams are doing really well with NIL. Not necessarily your star, even though your stars are getting paid fine too, but your second, third, fourth best player on your roster. They're making good money because they have leverage. A lot of them are saying, well, if you want to keep me, I know you need to keep me because you got to keep this roster together, or you want to keep this roster together. You have to have people to build around, the person that you're kind of making the focal point of the offense. So it's advantageous for a lot of these guys to go in the portal, explore what's happening, see what type of opportunities are out there for them. And if it doesn't work out, in most cases, they can come back. If it does, they can move on somewhere else. It's such a crazy system. Like, listen, I am totally pro athletes capitalizing off name, image, and likeness. It was an unfair, antiquated system for years that was way behind in the changing landscape of college sports. But I think it's also fair to acknowledge that what we're working with right now is a pretty broken system. I don't blame the players for trying to take advantage of it. Like, I don't blame guys like Jacoby Coles and Micah Peavy for saying, hey, why wouldn't I go see what other teams would offer me and see if there's some better opportunities for me out there as opposed to just sitting here and doing nothing. I totally get that. At the same time, even in pro sports, you have some guardrails, you have contracts, you have some things that forces players to commit, at least temporarily, to an organization. And what we're dealing with now is really crazy. So that's guys that are leaving. On the addition front, on players that TCU is targeting, we're getting some clarity there as well. Jamie Plunkett says TCU will host Michigan point guard Doug McDaniel for a visit this weekend. McDaniel averaged 16.3 points, 4.5 assists per game this season while shooting 36% from three-point range. He's currently rated as the number 13 overall transfer prospect in the portal from 247 Sports. So Doug McDaniel from Michigan, point guard, averaged 16 points a game. I think this would be great. I said this before the tournament. You have to have more shooting on this team. You got to have guys that can space the floor, can stretch the floor, who can give you a threat beyond the arc in this offense so everybody's not packing the paint and running that 1-3-1 zone that we saw so frequently late in the year because people were just daring TCU to shoot. Also, TCU has completed an in-home visit with Arizona State transfer guard Frankie Collins, according to On3. So Frankie Collins from Arizona State, Doug McDaniel from Michigan, targeting a few guards, going after some guys who can really score the rock to put around, Jace Posey, Isaiah Manning, David Punch, the young guys that you have coming in. It's going to be a very different roster in 2024. And I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but it's going to be a big challenge for this coaching staff again. And they've dealt with this the last few years with all the transfers, getting everyone on the same page, getting these guys to gel together, to play at a high level, and get to a place where they're doing their best. The transfer portal is a lot of fun, though. It's a fun time of year, just like football, where there's just constantly kind of guys out there that you can add to your roster to get better and to have more talent. We'll wrap things up when we come back. TCU baseball, they get a victory tonight against Houston. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. If you've been watching March Madness and you're like, man, I have to upgrade my TV situation, great opportunity for you. You should try an Amazon Fire TV or get the Amazon Fire TV stick. Amazon has access to live sports, movies, shows, everything you need, everything you would want. It's there and available for you with the Amazon Fire TV or the Amazon Fire TV stick. Check it out today. They also have fast channels they have launched. 24-hour channels that cover news, live sports, and more, including the Locked On Network. The Locked On Network has a fast channel that's now available to you where all day long there's shows like this that are just rotating through. You can turn on the TV, find it, Amazon Fire TV or the Amazon Fire TV stick. To learn more, go to this website, amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. That's amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Check it out today. Thank you to our friends at Amazon. It's TCU baseball back. The Frogs win against Houston 14-1 tonight. 21 hits, a very welcome sight. It was scoreless through 4 innings of play, but TCU finally broke things open. Chase Brunson had a 2-run single with the bases loaded and 2 outs to scratch across the first 2 runs of the game. Things picked up from there, and they started to rally. Took a 7-0 lead into the 7th, and then exploded after that. Ended up with 14 runs. Luis Rodriguez, welcome to the starting rotation, my friend. What a performance by him. 8 innings, 85 pitches, didn't walk anybody, only gave up 3 hits. I believe he struck out 9 tonight, worked efficiently, threw strikes, got the job done. This weekend rotation might be rounded into form. Luis Rodriguez, Peyton Tole, who had a really good start last week. We'll see what he does on Friday night. And then Cole Klecker. I like those 3 guys. Now, things have to come together, but that's a pretty good group. Kyle Ayers, bullpen arm, who's been good for TCU so far this season. Jamie Plunkett reported the news tonight that he is out for the season. That stinks. He went down with an elbow injury against Oklahoma State. He had been throwing the ball really well. So that's a big blow to the bullpen. But I think the biggest story of the night, Luis Rodriguez, just with a really good performance in a Friday night type of role, and hopefully that solidifies some things for this team going forward. We'll be back on Monday. Again, enjoy your Easter weekend. Thank you for listening to Locked On Horned Frogs. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. It's your team every day.